cold open. It's December 2nd, 2001. 20,000 Enron employees show up to work and find the doors locked. Their 401ks gone. Their pensions gone. The stock they were told to hold while executives quietly sold theirs, worth pennies. In one morning, the seventh largest company in America had simply ceased to exist, and almost nobody saw it coming. Not the auditors, not the banks, not the SEC. Here's how $74 billion in debt was hidden in plain sight, and how the people who were supposed to protect you helped bury it. Setup. To understand how Enron collapsed, you have to understand how Enron was built. In 1985, a soft-spoken natural gas executive named Kenneth Lay merged two pipeline companies, Houston Natural Gas and Inter-North, into a single entity he called Enron. It was a boring business, pipes in the ground, gas moving from point A to point B. Lay's job on paper was to keep the gas flowing and the shareholders satisfied. But Ken Lay had a bigger vision. He didn't want to run a pipeline company. He wanted to run the future. In 1990, Lay hired a 36-year-old McKinsey consultant named Jeffrey Skilling. Skilling was sharp, aggressive, and completely intolerant of anything he considered ordinary thinking. He had one idea that would change everything. He wanted Enron to stop selling gas and start selling the promise of gas, futures, contracts, financial instruments. He wanted to turn a physical commodity business into something that looked more like a bank. Lay said yes, and that decision lit the fuse on the largest corporate fraud America had ever seen. Bill Skilling's first major invention was something called mark-to-market accounting. And this is where the story gets dangerous. Traditional accounting is simple. You make money, you record it. You spend money, you record that too. What you report is what actually happened. Mark-to-market threw that rulebook out entirely. Under mark-to-market, Enron could sign a long-term energy contract, say a 20-year deal worth $800 million, and immediately book the entire projected profit from that contract on the same day it was signed, not when the money came in, not over 20 years. On day one, Skilling convinced the SEC to approve this method in 1992. The SEC said yes. The auditors at Arthur Andersen, one of the most respected accounting firms in the world, said yes. And almost nobody asked the obvious question, what happens if those projections are wrong? They were almost always wrong. But it didn't matter yet, because Enron just kept signing new contracts, booking new projected profits, and the revenue numbers kept climbing. The stock price climbed with them. By 2000, Enron's stock was trading at $90 per share. The company was posting reported revenues of $111 billion annually. Fortune magazine named it America's most innovative company 6 years in a row. 6 years in a row. Behind that number was something no one on the outside could see. The actual businesses Enron was running, broadband, water utilities, international power plants, were hemorrhaging cash. The mark-to-market profits were paper. The real operations were failing, and Enron needed somewhere to hide the losses before anyone noticed. Enter Andrew Fastow. Fastow was Enron's chief financial officer. He was 37 years old, ambitious, and brilliant in the most dangerous way. He was brilliant at building things that looked legitimate, but weren't. Starting in the late 1990s, Fastow began creating a network of outside entities, shell companies with names like LJM Cayman, LJM2, and a series of entities he called the Raptors. These weren't real companies in any meaningful sense. They existed on paper. Their entire purpose was to absorb Enron's failing assets and keep those losses off Enron's official balance sheet. Here's how it worked. Enron had an investment that had dropped in value by, say, $500 million. Instead of reporting that loss, Enron would transfer the asset to one of Fasto's shell entities. The loss disappeared from Enron's books. The shell entity, funded in part by Enron's own stock, absorbed it. And Fasto personally collected management fees from these entities totaling over $30 million. He was getting paid to hide his own company's failure. The board of directors knew. In 1999, they actually voted to suspend Enron's own code of ethics twice to allow Fasto to run these outside entities while simultaneously serving as CFO. Think about that. They didn't bend the rules. They formally voted to eliminate them. And the banks knew too. J.P. Morgan Chase and Citigroup structured transactions worth billions of dollars specifically designed to look like commodity trades when they were actually loans. Loans that kept Enron's debt invisible. Both banks would later pay a combined $286 million in settlements. But in the late 1990s, they were collecting fees and asking no uncomfortable questions. By mid-2001, the weight of the deception had become almost impossible to manage. The Raptor entities were running out of capacity. The broadband business had collapsed with the dot-com bubble. Skilling, who had been promoted to CEO in February 2001, resigned suddenly in August, just 6 months into the job. He cited personal reasons. He sold $60 million in Enron stock before he left. Ken Lay came back as CEO. He told employees the company was fine. He hosted internal meetings and encouraged staff to keep buying Enron stock for their retirement accounts. He called it a no-brainer at these prices. At the same time, Lay was selling his own shares, millions of dollars worth, through a little-known mechanism that allowed him to quietly repay personal loans to the company using stock, sidestepping normal disclosure requirements. Employees held. Executives sold. The gap between what was said publicly and what was known privately had never been wider. In October 2001, Enron announced a $618 million quarterly loss, the first public admission that something was deeply wrong. Within days, the SEC opened a formal investigation. Within weeks, it emerged that $1.2 billion in shareholder equity had simply been erased through accounting adjustments that should have been made years earlier. The stock went from $90 to under $1 in 14 months. Revelation, December 2, 2001. Bankruptcy. The largest in American history at that point, $63.4 billion in assets. Gone. For the executives, the timing had been almost surgical. Skilling had sold before the fall. Lay had used the loan repayment mechanism to quietly exit. Fasto had collected his $30 million in fees from the very entities designed to sink the ship slowly enough that no one noticed until it was too late. For the employees, there was no exit. Because of how Enron's retirement plan was structured, workers had been encouraged, sometimes required, to hold their 401k savings in Enron stock. When the collapse came, the plan was placed in a lockdown period, preventing employees from selling. The executives faced no such restriction. Patricia Dunn had worked at Enron for 15 years. Her retirement account, nearly entirely in Enron stock, was worth $700,000 in early 2001. By December, it was worth $8,000. She was 56 years old. She was not alone. 20,000 people like her. Ken Lay was convicted on 6 counts of fraud and conspiracy in May 2006. He died of a heart attack before sentencing. Skilling was sentenced to 24 years, later reduced to 14. Fasto served 6 years and was released in 2011. Arthur Andersen, the accounting firm that signed off on all of it, was criminally charged and ceased to exist entirely. 85,000 employees worldwide lost their jobs. The ripple didn't stop at Enron. Takeaway. Here's what Enron actually teaches us, and it's not what most people say. The lesson isn't that one company went rogue. The lesson is that every single institution designed to catch this failed completely. The auditors, the banks, the credit rating agencies, the SEC, the board. They all looked at the same numbers and saw what they wanted to see, or what they were paid to see. The most dangerous fraud isn't the kind that looks like fraud. It's the kind that looks like genius. When a company is reporting